we will be back with the Reverend Barry W. Lynn.
I ain't talking about East Germany. I'm talking about Tennessee. Quarantine camps for the uninformed people that are still in refusal to be vaccinated. Look, if that don't bother you, you might as well show up at another church next week, because I'm going to keep raising Cain about all this nonsense. I don't care what Bill Lee says. I don't care what fraudulent fake Joe Biden says. I don't care what Planned Parenthood says. I don't care what Chris Cuomo says. I don't care what Gavin Newsom said. I don't care what Nancy Pelosi and her insurrectionist nonsense has to say. You better wake up, church. You better wake up. They hate us. We are speed bumps to the deep state on the road to their progressive communism. And I'll shout it from the rooftop if I'm the last one. I live by what I say, and I will die by what I say if I have to. I'll fight this garbage until my dying breath.
And of course, his dying breath is going to be, I got COVID. I'm drowning in my own fluids. Reverend Barry W. Lynn, what is this separation of church and state reheated bilge that you talk about? What is dangerous? He's a good man, this Pastor Locke. You have to unmute yourself, sir. I have to unmute you. While you're unmuting yourself, yes, I will introduce you. The Reverend Barry W. Lynn, for nearly a quarter of a century, ran Americans United for Separation Church and State. He is an attorney, a member of the Supreme Court Bar, as well as an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ. You're a minister, just like Pastor Locke. And yet, you have used your legal education, your spiritual education to separate government from the church. What are you so afraid of?
I'm just afraid of Pastor Locke. No, hey, did he just say something about somebody being a turd? Did he just say that? I'm pretty sure he did.
I can play it again, and I will.
Yeah, please. I'd like to hear it, because there's another turd reference I was going to make. In fact, if he didn't say it, I'm still going to make a turd reference.
Okay.
God's about to bring the whole house down, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, that's the wrong one. Hang on.
Okay.
There's so much to choose from. Hang on. That is Pastor Locke. So that would be, hang on. Oh, come on. Where are you? I can't find it. No. Oh, here it is.
Okay.
I ain't talking about East Germany. I'm talking about Tennessee. Quarantine camps for the uninformed people that are still in refusal to be vaccinated. Look, if that don't bother you, you might as well show up at another church next week, because I'm going to keep raising Cain about all this nonsense. I don't care what Bill Lee says. I don't care what fraudulent fake Joe Biden says. I don't care what Planned Parenthood says. I don't care what Chris Cuomo said. I don't care what Gavin Newsom said. I don't care what Nancy Pelosi and her insurrectionist nonsense has to say. You better wake up, church. You better wake up. They hate us. We are speed bumps to the deep state on the road to their progressive communism. And I'll shout it from the rooftop if I'm the last one. I live by what I say, and I will die by what I say if I have to. I'll fight this garbage until my dying breath.
And thus, January 6th.
Yep. But he did say turd.
He didn't say turd.
Yes, he did.
Oh, he did.
Oh, and we don't want to have to play this a third time. But let's assume he did. Okay. Because he did. Okay. But this is a word used in the pages of the Washington Times, a very conservative non-alternative to the Washington Post, when Josh Merritt, who was one of these cybersecurity experts that Mike Lindell turned to try to prove what he couldn't prove in the last 3 days, Merritt tells the Washington Times that Lindell's data is a turd that Merritt, was asked to polish into a diamond. Isn't that worth having to play that a second time?
Yes.
No, but Lindell's another reason you have to keep church and state separate, because he had a big 3 days cybersecurity conference, which literally proved nothing. He did not have any data. And then early on Thursday morning, he said to the crowd, I don't have all my data because it's been corrupted by Antifa. And of course, he also said that he was assaulted Wednesday night outside of the place where this was held in South Dakota. But nobody saw him being attacked or assaulted. There's no evidence that he was, but
he blamed Jesse Smollett, I believe, right?
I think he did.
Yeah.
Now who knows that anymore?
Right.
But the reason, this is a guy who made pillows, and now he's a celebrity. And although even a lot of right wingers were disappointed by what he didn't show over the course of the last 3 days, he's still an incredibly potent figure in right-wing circles. So these people that have no background, no education, no analytical abilities whatsoever can still become prominent voices in the right. And because he is so much a promoter of his brand of Christianity, he's the religious right, and people love him. And right. He's a powerful figure. And I have been, I must say, tempted on many occasions to order, because there is, I believe, a 30-day return period for his stuff, to order about 100 of his pillows and then send them all back. But I didn't do that. And I wouldn't recommend people do that, because it's very nasty.
Right. That would be wrong to order.
It would be wrong. It would be wrong.
Right. And what is the number? In the chat room, I want to make sure we have the number so people know. Sometimes you're dialing a number, and you might accidentally dial the MyPillow guy and then accidentally order 100 pillows and then send them back. So if you could alert us in the chat room to the phone number for the MyPillow guy to make sure that nobody,
of course,
dials
because I of course don't have his number, but I'm sure somebody will be able to look it up and put it into the chat in case, just as a warning. Do not call this number and order 100 pillows. That's what you should say. Right. And send them back.
Let's stay with religion for a while.
All right, let's do that.
You have dedicated your life, not to the church, but protecting us from the church. Well, you've also ministered to people.
Of course.
If I ever do get married, I'm going to ask you to marry me. Not literally marry me.
You mean perform the wedding?
Yes, you're going to be performing. Oh, yes. But
absolutely.
I would have you. So you've dedicated your life to pointing out that there are charlatans out there who identify people who are lost, who are searching, and are angry, and who need meaning. And they're confused. And this pastor is no different from, as you point out, the MyPillow guy or Donald Trump,
right,
or Tucker Carlson, and there are consequences. Now, this pastor is from Tennessee, right? Greg Locke is from Tennessee.
Correct.
And they are having a crisis in Tennessee with COVID. People won't wear masks, and he ministers to white Christians.
Right.
White Christians. Let me show you the rage that he inspires. And I want to ask you, not as a minister, but as an attorney, what the cops should have done in this situation. I'm going to play you a clip. There was a meeting, a board meeting, where they were explaining mask mandates, and one of the gentlemen who is for the mandates, he works for the state, I believe, ran to his car, and then people were threatening him, threatening to hurt him. You'll notice these are white people. One of the men who is screaming the most is the rabble-rouser behind this, and it's a temper tantrum. When you hear his voice, it's like a child screaming at his parents, "You don't love me." You listen to this white man screaming. It's like a child screaming, "Nobody loves me. Nobody loves me." Tell me what the role of the cops is in this situation.
Put it back on. Put your mask on. Kids sucking that bacteria. How you like that? We know who you are. We know who you are.
Keep it calm.
No more masks.
Keep it calm. Keep it calm.
No more masks.
We're on these guys' side. They're on our side.
No, they're not. They're not on our side.
The police are on our side. The police are on our side. Let's calm down.
Yes.
Calm down. We know who you are.
We
know
know
who
who
you are. You
You
can leave
know
freely,
who you are.
but we will find you, and we
You
know
will
who you
never
are.
be allowed in
We know
public
who you
again.
are.
You will never be allowed.
I know
We never
who you
let him be
are.
allowed in public
I know who
again.
you are. I know who you are. Let him out. Let's let him out. Let him out.
Whoa, you better watch out. You better watch out. You better watch out.
Keep it calm. Everybody back up. Please. Everybody back up. Back up. Back up. I'm back, man. I'm on your side.
All right. So we know who you are. You
Yep.
will never be allowed outside again.
Right.
Is that speech protected by the First Amendment?
No, it's not. I mean, and I'm pretty much a First Amendment absolutist, but those direct threats against a single individual, like I think he was a healthcare worker in the car, that is not protected speech. That is a threat of imminent bodily injury. And the police should have told them to be quiet. And when they weren't quiet, the second time they made those threats, they should have been arrested. That's what the police ought to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's this misunderstanding of the First Amendment. It's a slippery slope. If you can't threaten to hurt somebody physically, what? You're not allowed to threaten to hurt somebody, correct?
Right. But this is the same kind of thing that colleges and universities went through in the late 70s about speech codes. People said they had these terrible examples. An African-American woman on a Pennsylvania university campus she's harassed by a group of men who make fun of her race, who make fun of her appearance.
With David Hogg.
Exactly. But so then people said, well, that's not enough. We need speech codes. And there has never been a speech code that has passed constitutional muster. In other words, never has there been a listing of circumstances under which students cannot say something. But as my boss at the time, Nadine Strassen, the head of the ACLU's board of directors, she and Henry Hyde, who literally this was the only good idea Henry Hyde ever had, supported a piece of legislation that I did help to write, abolishing the possibility of having colleges and universities adopt speech codes. But when she did a press conference with them, I just read it through it a couple weeks ago, where she said, if you want to make sure that people are not harassed, that they are not threatened, there are ways to do that directly. Under current law, you don't have to institute speech codes to do it. And this is the same case. You don't have to. That is a threat directed at one specific individual by two or three. I couldn't quite see how many there were. people who are saying, you'll never get out of here. We know where you live. If that's not a threat that is actionable under a statute in Tennessee, then I'd be surprised. I'd really be surprised.
If they were black,
they'd have been arrested and they probably would have been shot. Yes, they would have been shot.
The gentleman, I almost want to play it again because he's this white, the one who was screaming, "We know where you live." He's a young, very well-built guy, and he looks like a child who has discovered that life is unfair and mommy and daddy are not taking care of me. It sounded like a child, a frightened little child who just found out that life is incredibly unfair and mommy and daddy are part of that unfairness. The responsibility that we all have, all of us as citizens, is Pastor Locke, bad last name, is Pastor Locke a good citizen?
No, he's not a good citizen, but what he said in that clip is not actionable. That is not a threat. Just the fact that he names people, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, that is not what he said in the clip you just showed twice.
Well, I'm not asking.
It's not a threat.
I know that, but to say, I'm going to fight them to my dying breath.
No, not enough.
Is that a good citizen?
No, of course it's not a good citizen.
Why is it not why? I know this needs explaining. I know this is beneath you. Why are you a bad citizen? Why are you a bad Christian? Why are you a bad pastor? Why is Pastor Locke a bad guy? Forget the fact that he cheated on his wife, and it's been pretty dicey on the alimony with the woman he took up with his wife's best friend. But forget that.
Yeah, forget it.
Forget that. Why is he a bad Christian, a bad pastor, and a bad citizen, and a bad American?
Well, because he has no fundamental understanding that common sense and decency are the guiding principles of people who call themselves Christians. Now, that's not to say that the Bible doesn't mention times when Jesus got very angry, most notably when he threw the money changers out of the temple. I mean, he literally overturned, if the accounts are accurate, he overturned the places in which they were changing money. And he said, this does not belong in my Father's house. But here is a guy who, in presumably his father's house, he's talking in a church, he's talking at a worship service. He shouldn't be in the position of trying to get people so riled up with hatred, blind hatred, that he can get away with saying that. Because hatred is just not a Christian value. And he's promoting that. And he's promoting it against people with responsibilities to govern. But whether he was doing it with those people or just people in downtown Chattanooga or wherever his church is, you don't preach hate as a Christian minister. That's not what you do. And you don't hate people in office if you're a good American. I mean, an intense dislike for Donald Trump. And it took me a long time not to just say, I hate you. But you can't do that, because then you fall into the same trap that these people do. Hate against hate, instead of taking a deep breath, saying, maybe I don't love you, but I don't hate you. That's what ministers ought to be saying in churches. They should not be ranting like this clown.
Right. And if you want, by the way, if you want to win, you don't get your side riled up that way and get them all irrational. I mean, this is you're a lawyer and a minister, you have to be more responsible than, say, somebody like me. You don't, people trust you if you're a minister.
Yep.
He's sanctioning violence. He's saying it's okay to be really angry. When you throw that punch, God is on my side. That was the danger of Jerry Falwell when he blamed 9/11 on the LGBTQ community.
Yes.
He ended up getting Matthew Shepard crucified.
That's right. He did.
Because if God is saying it's all right to hate these people, then punching them or crucifying them, I'm still going to get into heaven. It's very irresponsible.
Of course
it's
it is.
funny. It's funny.
Yeah, in a way.
Getting people riled up and angry, being a wrecking ball, is the easiest thing to be. To be a wrecking ball is the easiest position to take. It's why comedians are so dangerous when it comes to talking policy. I've witnessed firsthand some people I've worked for who taste the gladiatorial spirit of an audience and get intoxicated by the bloodlust of a wrecking ball and mistake the cheers for righteousness.
Right.
And it's just demagogic, and it's dangerous to appeal to the basest instincts of the mob. And the way they do that is they're a wrecking ball. I don't care what the facts are. I don't care what the laws are. I want when I want it, and I want it now. Don't try to explain it to me. It's black and white. This is a moral issue, and I want it now. And that leads to violence and a lot of money in your bank account.
Yeah, and it as a strict understanding of what incitement is, I'd argue that what Pastor Locke said was not incitement, but what is heard.
It was incitement.
But what are the words?
Directly, indirectly,
right.
It's incitement.
Yeah, but the Supreme Court says indirect incitement is not criminal conduct.
I'm not talking about the court of law.
No.
And I'm sure that this Pastor Locke doesn't want to incite violence, right?
I don't think he cares if he does or he doesn't.
I think you're right. I think he wants to.
I don't think he cares.
He wants to make a buck, and he wants to be seen.
Exactly.
He's an exhibitionist,
so to speak.
Yeah.
When Jerry
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. When Jerry Falwell said that, he said that the LGBT community, abortion advocates, and by that night on 9/11, I was getting a lot of calls from reporters who said, "Why didn't he mention you? Why didn't he mention Barry Lynn? Because he hated me." Possibly as much as anybody. But to correct matters, a week later, Ann Coulter wrote a column and said that she thought that Falwell was right, but missed two people to blame for 9/11, me and Teddy Kennedy.
Right.
So, but this it did 9/11. The number of people. Well, yeah, I am, but I like to be in good company. But remember all the things that happened in Arizona.
Kennedy, I remember Teddy Kennedy was a better driver than you.
Yeah, he probably was. But remember, in Arizona, I think literally hours after 9/11, after the towers fell, there was a Sikh gas station attendant, and of course Sikhs in America and around the world generally wear turbans. He was shot by a guy in Arizona who thought he was a Muslim. Sikhs are not Muslims. But so there are these real world consequences of the kind of rhetoric that people like Falwell were using. But you're right, as a technical matter, you couldn't criminalize it. But as a moral principle, it is inexcusable. And what Pastor Locke said on that clip is inexcusable. If he were on this show, I would say that's an inexcusable breach, not only of Christian values, but of human American decency.
And it's the plague of hyper-individualism that disconnects us. It's what we see on the right, and I'm saying it on our side, whatever our side is. I'm not so sure people who say they're on our side are actually on our side. Hyper-individualism, where you don't care what the facts are, you don't care who gets hurt, what's in it for me, or what's in it for my small select group of us. It's irresponsible. People don't know what it means to be a good citizen. People who go into the public square and follow politics like it's a blood sport, like it's MMA.
Yep.
And I see them on our side. They claim to be on our side. Some of them are irresponsible, and they're more interested in winning or proving something than actually helping people. If you go into politics, if you go into the public square to satisfy yourself and not others, you're a dishonest actor. And rabble rousers are not to be trusted. They don't have goodness in their heart. They're not there to help. They're there to help themselves. Character doesn't count.
I think.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I think that the latest generation, arguably Democrats as well as Republicans, but certainly Republicans, are nothing like the Republicans that I was occasionally negotiating with in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. I've talked to some former members of Congress that I used to work with very recently. And I said, guys like you really cared about the country. You cared about its values. Yes, you did want to get reelected and all of that, but you were smarter people who spent more time doing the job of learning how to govern. And there's some pushback from those people, but I still think it's true. In the mid 1970s, when you looked at the kind of post Watergate, I think 38 Democrats were elected, and they were rabble rousing Democrats, but they were good people. They were sensible people. They honestly had values that transcended what cocktail party they were going to meet up with some donors. But this time it's very difficult to look at these people and say they're pure in heart. And, even Elizabeth Warren, and I said this when she was running, she was my first choice for the presidential nomination. And then all of a sudden she says, and she'd always said, no political action committee money. And then she said, I'm having to take some because everybody is doing it. That's not a principled person. That's a person who's trying to protect herself. And I said a couple of weeks ago, there are very few political action committees that operate properly. Those are the ones that take your money and immediately give it to on-the-ground grassroots organizations to do the work of getting Democrats elected. Yeah. But the other ones they're just totally phony.
I like Crystal Ball.
I do too.
But I found out she's part of that scam, that she started the super PAC.
She did.
Yeah, and 1/3 of the money was going to her, and she defended it by saying, well, this money that I'm taking, she was paying herself like 1/3 of the donations, and it wasn't going to the candidates. And her explanation was, my salary is what's going to the candidates because I talk to them on the phone.
Yeah.
So, she's an accountant. She's married to a venture capitalist. There's this opportunism. Our side, and I agree with everything she says. But they know how to work this system. People are entitled to make a living. Crystal Ball is entitled to make a living. I'm not so sure her husband, who's a venture capitalist, should be allowed to make a living, and I'm not so sure her work. I mean, we should be getting rid of super PACs, not gaming that system.
Right.
That's part of the problem. Are you optimistic about Nancy Pelosi? Has she shown? We're going to have Mark Savasco on in about 20 minutes. He's Congressman Ted Lieu's chief of staff. Is Nancy Pelosi feeling the heat from the progressives?
Yeah, I think she is, because I think she knows that if she hadn't been so clear with Schumer that she was not going to take up this, I mean, I think it's almost worthless, this infrastructure bill that they've just passed. But she said, we'll put it up and we'll probably pass it, but only if you also, in budget reconciliation terms, come up with something a lot larger. And that's the $3.5 trillion bill that kind of slipped through just the other day. So she did, I think she was feeling the pressure from AOC and the squad and others that if they didn't do something serious and didn't try to get it through the Senate all at the same time, she was going to lose a lot of progressive Democratic votes, as she should have, on this so-called bipartisan infrastructure bill.
Right. And so, hearkening back to wrecking balls, there are seasons to our life when we're in our 20s. We should be wrecking balls. When we get older, we calm down and realize how little we actually know and how hard it is. I believe you're a wrecking ball when it's election season, during the silly season of an election. That's when you're a wrecking ball. You throw punches and try to destroy, metaphorically, people who don't agree with you. This is not the silly season. This is where you roll up your sleeves and try to pass legislation. I don't like Nancy Pelosi. I don't like Schumer. I don't like Biden. I trust Bernie. I trust Katie Porter, even though she's an Elizabeth Warren acolyte. I think there are honest people in the Progressive Caucus. I trust Pramila Jayapal. I've got problems with some of these people in the Progressive Caucus, but they're doing my bidding. Would you agree that Nancy Pelosi, whose husband should be in prison for insider trading, she's a bag man for the Swig family in San Francisco, would you agree that she has a hard job right now?
I think she does have a hard job, and I think it's made even harder because she fundamentally, I didn't know her when she first got to the Congress, but she doesn't seem to take seriously the fact that people who were voting for Biden and voting for Democrats in the last election really expected fundamental change. They did not expect that they would only be voting for Biden and Democrats to get rid of Donald Trump. I don't think she's understood that. And that's why.
Or are we making it clear to her? Again, this is not the silly season. This is the time to see if we can get these two infrastructure bills passed, which are not enough, but it's pretty huge.
Yep.
And the Republicans can kill the bipartisan deal, and all it takes is Manchin or Sinema to kill the reconciliation bill.
Right.
There are a lot of balls up in the air. Now is not the time for a wrecking ball. Would you agree that this is a balancing act? This is how bills get passed. It's disgusting. It's dirty. It requires giving money to the oil companies to shut up. I guess we're giving $50 billion to the oil companies. I don't understand how things work but I kind of do understand how they do. And if you want to expand Medicare, it's going to be, these two bills are going to be really hard to get passed. And if they pull it off, it will be important. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, it's very fair. They will be very important. But remember, there's a large but there, and it is that you have to do something on voting rights, not just the John Lewis Act, which brings back a lot of the provisions of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, but this S1, the For the People Act. If you don't,
that's what they're calling it. But Joe Manchin has pretty much. Well, I mean, they're going to make voter ID in 50 states, right?
Well, that was one of the things he said he would want to be sure that he would actually support the bill. I don't know what Sinema's problem is with it, but I mean, but Manchin knows that he has this incredible amount of power, that he's going to be there. Kristen Sinema, as I think I mentioned last week, the idea of the Republicans in Arizona embracing an out bisexual woman as the standard bearer for their Senate campaign, I think is a non-starter. She has to stay with the Democrats. And 75% of the Democrats polled a few weeks ago in Arizona said they want her to be primaried. They want her to be primaried, and there are going to be other people who will say that.
Republicans in Arizona would not vote for a bisexual.
They would only watch porn with her.
Right.
Yeah. No, I think they would have a lot of trouble voting for her. A lot of trouble. And more importantly, the Arizona Republican Party is probably much more conservative than the average Republican who happens to live in Arizona. The party's not going to embrace her, and if the party doesn't embrace her, then she can't be elected as a
Arizona is where we got the John Birch Society.
Yep.
It's where Barry Goldwater comes from. There is a nasty, nasty conservative streak in Arizona that unfortunately has spread around the country.
Let me say something about Barry Goldwater, though. Barry Goldwater is an example of a guy who, in the twilight of his life, all of a sudden started to come up with some interesting ideas. When he was asked to support a measure to keep gay people out of the military, he famously said, "I don't really care if people are straight in the military. I just care that they can shoot straight." And when Ronald Reagan asked him to support a constitutional amendment to bring government-mandated prayer back to public schools, he went and saw him, and then he came out and he said, there are so many different forms of religion in the native people alone of Arizona, you could never write a prayer that wouldn't offend somebody. And so he didn't vote for it in spite of Reagan. So here's a guy.
Well, Hitler built the Autobahn.
Yeah, he did. But I think this is more important. I mean, I think what he did, but these are things that demonstrated that he came a long way from his early racist opinions about everything, as did, of all people, George Wallace. George Wallace was a dyed-in-the-wool racist. He became one because he used to be more moderate his first campaign for the governor of Alabama, and he didn't win. So then he decided to get even harsher. But John Frankenheimer, the famous director who did The Manchurian Candidate and a lot of other films, he did a two-part television movie.
I knew John Frankenheimer's brother, Weisenheimer.
That's good. I expected it to be better, but that's okay.
I just wanted you to lose your train of thought.
So I interviewed Frankenheimer. I was filling in for Bill Press or somebody, and he was on, and I asked him, "Did you spent time with Wallace? What did you think about his racial attitudes at the end of his life?" And Frankenheimer said, "I think he honestly was sorry he was a racist, that he really saw that he had made a huge moral mistake."
Did Frankenheimer do the HBO dramatization of Wallace's life?
I thought it was actually an NBC thing, but yes, he's the guy who did it.
Right. And at the end, he actually had his come to Jesus moment while he was governor. A lot of African Americans in Alabama voted for George Wallace because while he believed in segregation, he believed in separate but equal. He did believe that black schools should have the same resources that white schools did. He did have African Americans who voted for him, and then he did, especially after he was shot, he did lighten up a little, or darken up a little. The problem with Barry Goldwater is he is the text of conservatism. I mean, he is what gave us Ronald Reagan, and he is an icon of the conservative movement. And when he was in full blush, he voted against the civil rights movement, wanted to drop a nuclear bomb on North Vietnam.
Yeah.
You know, I get a little tired of people having come to Jesus moments when they can't do anything for Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
it would be nice if he was on Jesus' side when he could actually help Jesus.
yeah, I mean, who knows what would, but remember when Goldwater was running for president, he seemed to have some principles. Remember this, the slogan was, "In your heart, you know he's right." And then the Democrats said, yes, far right. But they weren't such great people either. These were people who he was running against, who supported the Vietnam War. Maybe they didn't want to bomb it back to the Stone Age, but these were not principled people in all instances. Lyndon Baines Johnson, yes, he signed the Civil Rights Act in 1964, but he told a lot of people at the time, you know, the fact that I've signed this means Democrats have lost the South forever.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that a sign of courage, or was it just, I'll get through another couple of years, what the hell?
Right. Well, we've been talking about responsibility and what when you're a public speaker, what you owe your country. And Barry Goldwater, when he accepted the nomination, was it the Cow Palace in San Francisco?
Yes.
He said, "Extremism in defense of liberty is no vice. Moderation in pursuit of justice is no virtue." And let me remind you also that moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue. What is the difference between that and
God's about to bring the whole house down, ladies and gentlemen. These bunch of sex trafficking mongrels are...
I mean, that kind of speech about, that's almost... that gives license to insurrection, what Barry Goldwater said. Extremism in defense of liberty is no vice. Well, birth to a party of extremists.
Yes, it is. But in principle, I wish there were more people in the Democratic Party who honestly felt that way today, that they want to protect liberty, real liberty, not your right to not wear a mask, but genuine issues of conscience and issues of justice. And I wish they were a little bit more extreme about it. I think that's a good standard, not necessarily a bad one, although at the time that Goldwater made that speech, of course, he had mainly the wrong definitions of liberty that he was thinking about. Don't you wish, don't you wish that instead of going home, members of Congress would have seen enough that there's a lot of things to do, that they would just be sitting around in Washington working through this entire month of August instead of, tromping off. And I think that the Senate tromped off today.
The House is coming back in August.
Maybe.
Well, she said that they're coming back. We'll ask Mark Savasco. He's coming, I hope. I think she's bringing the House back to go over the reconciliation bill.
Correct.
It's very easy, especially when I'm burnt out, to be a wrecking ball.
Yeah. Well,
You're tired or scared, uninformed, empty, always resort to anger and shouting. It doesn't, it's dangerous, and you don't win that way. You scare people away. It's in the end, it's not persuasive. People don't trust you. In the end, it's about making deals. The thing about Bernie, because I was, all in on Bernie.
sure.
And the rap against Bernie was he wasn't a deal maker. Well, they proved that he was, that behind the scenes he could make deals. That was what Biden was sold to us with. He can make deals. Bernie can't. Well, it turns out Bernie also could make deals. This is the game in Washington. The way it's being played right now is how it gets done until the next insurrection, when it doesn't get done this way. But this is the way bills get made and passed. And I would like, when Mark Savasco stops, and for him to explain what Votorama means and what this infrastructure, what the passage means. We have a framework for Bernie's reconciliation bill, which only means the committees now go back and have to draft
And fill it out. Sure.
Right. It's like a screenplay. Well, we got the beats. We know the character arcs. Now write the dialogue. And that's how it's done. I don't understand it. And when you become a wrecking ball, I want it done now, and no masks, and force the vote. Not how things get done. And when you say that it's not how things get done, people accuse you of being a moderate or a victim of your own expertise. You're not a dreamer. There's a time for extremism and being a wrecking ball. And within the confines of this octagon, yes.
But I don't agree that every person who takes an extreme position on issues or who fights in an extreme fashion is necessarily a wrecking ball.
No, I'm saying that do it on the issues. Do it on,
Yep.
And understand that if you want universal preschool, you may have to give the oil companies $50 billion. You have to tip them $50 to get the front row seat at the Copa.
Yeah.
I wish there was no mafia. I wish the maitre d' at the Copa wasn't mobbed up, but I want to see Jerry Vale
So much.
$50 to get the front row seat. That's just the way it is.
Let me just, before I leave you.
Well, we can keep talking till Mark Savasco.
Okay, well, here's what I'd like to go back to Tennessee for a minute.
Yes.
Because there's a marvelous story in some of the papers yesterday about a woman in Chattanooga, Tennessee, who believed that the school board, which just decided a few days ago that parents could opt their children out of wearing masks. And she wrote a letter to the school board and said, I would just like to tell you in all sincerity, I would like to opt my daughter out of the dress code at the high school. So if she wants to wear leggings, if she wants to wear spaghetti straps, she wants to wear cutoffs, I'm going to just let her do it. And she has my full support, because if we can opt out of school policies, that's the one I want to opt out of.
That's great.
I think it's wonderful. And it got her a lot of attention. But she made a point. And some would say, well, that's silly. She didn't really care. I mean, somebody asked her, do you really care that much about this dress code? And she said, not really. I just want to make a point. But those points are good.
You don't want to wear a mask? I don't want to wear a bra.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So it's a good point. And maybe see, maybe that's the kind of thing I'm thinking about extremism. I mean, taking a principled position and arguing it and holding firm to it. That's what we need. That's what more Democrats need to do. And if it doesn't mean they're always going to get elected, but it does mean that they're always going to have a commitment to principle, a commitment to justice, a commitment to liberty as it should be imagined in America. That's not crazy. And I'm not suggesting you say it is, but I mean, I do think there's a time when you need to be a profile in courage, where you need to say, even if I lose an election, I'm going to stand on this principle. That's what people like Senator Phil Hart of Michigan were. They were people who, even if it cost them an election, they were going to stand for the principles that they believed in.
Right. And by the way, a profile in courage means you did something which cost you your seat.
Yeah.
It's not a profile in courage, according to Ted Sorensen and JFK, unless you did something and sacrifice and you lost your job.
Yeah.
Because of it.
Yeah. Well, Phil Hart actually, he lost his life to cancer before he was up for re-election, but he was dogged. He would, Joanne, you remember Joanne? She
the person I wish was here instead of you.
I know that person you would hope for. So I was testifying about amnesty.
I closed my eyes and pretended.
So she goes up. I testified at the Judiciary Committee in the Senate about, I think it was about war resistor amnesty, and she walked up to Phil Hart and said, "Senator, how can you possibly take these positions, very clear, very correct, about so many issues?" Because he had also been in trouble recently for his strong support of reproductive rights. And Phil looked at her and said, it's because sometimes you just have to do the right thing. I don't think there are many senators, Democrats, even Democrats, who would say that today. I don't think you'd see Chuck Schumer saying, well, it's a hard vote, but it's the right one, so I'm going to make it. I don't see that happening. Right. I wish I did.
Before you go, let me play you a clip from Josh Mandel. He is running for Senate in Ohio. And Bob Portman, who gave us the infrastructure deal with Kyrsten Sinema, he's stepping down, and there's going to be a Republican primary. This is Josh Mandel. He is I believe he's a Marine. I believe he served, and he's running based on his service to the country. Let's listen to Josh Mandel, candidate for Senate, and afterwards, you tell me if he is a loyal American.
Okay.
He served our country. You can serve this country and not be. Benedict Arnold served this country.
Right.
You tell me if Josh Mandel is a loyal American.
All right.
Actually came out and called on the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate to completely abolish this January 6th commission. I don't think we should have a January 6th commission. I think it's a waste of taxpayer time. It's a waste of taxpayer money. And I think we should replace it with a November 3rd commission.
Oh, yes.
If Congress wants to spend time investigating something, they should investigate the fact that this election was stolen from Donald Trump. And they should not only be auditing the vote in Arizona, and I went out there, Pete. I went to Maricopa County. I went to the Coliseum where they're auditing the vote. I think we should use the full investigative power and subpoena power of the Congress to audit and look under the hood of what happened in Arizona, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, in Georgia, in all these states where we know they were harvesting ballots, where they were using quote unquote public health as a reason to change the rules with 2 minutes left in the game, where they were allowing people to vote at addresses that don't exist or were boarded up. And listen, as a Marine Corps vet, you and I both know when people cheat in elections, when these Democrats cheat in elections, they're not only disenfranchising their neighbors, they're stomping on the graves of every Marine,
Oh, yeah.
soldier, sailor, airman who's paid the ultimate sacrifice so we can live free, so we can have that right to vote every November. And
Yes.
so I think this whole January 6th thing, this commission, whatever, Pelosi, whatever you call it, it's a total waste of time.
That's Josh Mandel, a young Republican,
Yep.
Marine, saying that the January 6th Commission is dishonoring the men and women who gave their lives for our country. I'll start first.
Please do.
I think Josh Mandel is a disgrace to the uniform. I think you can serve in the military and be a coward, a criminal, and disloyal, like General Michael Flynn. And I
Yes.
think Josh Mandel is hiding behind the uniform to advocate insurrection and is exploiting all the brave men and women who sacrificed their lives for democracy. The insurrection was an attack on everything our soldiers are supposed to be fighting for. And for Josh Mandel to invoke the military and his uniform and say that the insurrection on January 6th should be ignored, and to then say that Donald Trump won,
Yeah.
he's a disgrace to his uniform, and he's a disloyal American or a Republican.
Which is often synonymous. Yeah, no, I think everything you just said is correct. This is a disgraceful way. This is when Lieutenant William Calley was determined to be in large part responsible for the My Lai massacre. A lot of people said, but look, he served his country. He went to Vietnam, but you don't go to Vietnam and then slaughter half of a village and then pat yourself on the back and say, thank God I'm a patriot. But Josh is also stupid. I mean, how many months do you need to look at things like this ridiculous thing that's going on in Maricopa County, this so-called audit, and not reach the conclusion that there is no there? It's just like that Pillow guy's 3 days of cyber experts proving that Trump won the election. That proved nothing. There's not one shred of evidence to support anything that Josh just said in that clip you played. Not a single thing. So you wonder, what is it? Is it a willful ignorance? It's got to be. He can't honestly believe this. If he does believe it, of course, he's literally too stupid to serve in the Senate.
Yeah. Which, before you go, Mark Savasco's about to join us. Thank the variant is around, so I don't have to pick up the tab when I go to Washington. I can still say, I'd love to visit you guys.
You're going to take us to lunch, though.
I'll take you to dinner.
Dinner, okay.
I will buy everybody dinner in Washington, D.C. as soon as this COVID thing is
over. Yeah, before we get to Epsilon, let me write that down.
Yeah.
Should I ask Joanne if she'd like to come to dinner, or is she not invited?
Well, how about she comes
and I just stay home? Yeah, maybe I'll be in Massachusetts looking after my grandchildren.
Yeah, and having your brain turn to mush. Do they read the New York Times?
I have to read it to them.
Oh, okay.
But they constantly ask for it. They say, Pop, can you read me the New York Times? And then, as I said in a note to you a couple of days ago, and then they say, would you read me War and Peace before I go to bed? They always say that.
So you ran Americans United for Separation Church and State. Mark Savasco declined to be promoted to a panelist. Was it something we said? When let me try. I'm multitasking here.
All right.
Hang on. When you see somebody like Josh Mandel, it's immoral, is what he's doing. My inclination is to say, forget critical thinking. We need morality here, and so I can see why people want to introduce religion into the public square.
Sure.
Lying. Whew, that was. Thank God Mark Savasco is here. Reverend Barry W. He was cursing up a blue streak like.
Yeah, it was really rough.
I just it was like it was one. Where is this here? Hang on. Okay. Is this it? I got my squeaky chair. This is what I have to do when the Reverend Barry. It's like Morse code.
Yeah.
The Reverend
you know what you
Barry
just said? Do you know what you just said in Morse code?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm shocked.
Did you study the Morse code? Do you know it?
No, I
you
don't
weren't
know
a telegraph operator?
No, I released carrier pigeons into the skies. That's how I communicated as a lad.
I worked my way through college doing telegraph sex. I would.
Yeah.
That's how I'm old. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
The Reverend Barry W. Lynn, for nearly a quarter of a century, ran Americans United for Separation of Church and State. He is a lawyer, a member of the Supreme Court Bar, as well as a ordained minister in the United Church of Christ. And he came to us tonight from Massachusetts, where he's wasting time with his grandchildren.
I did show them a clip of me on this show when I was talking about daycare. And they were impressed because prior to this, they'd only seen Joanne, some clips on C-SPAN. So now I'm working my way up to being seen with affection by both you and my grandchildren.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll see you next week.
Stay out of trouble, Reverend.
Only good trouble.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.